Hey folks, welcome to Wolfpane's Gaming Den. Today we have another tutorial video for you guys. We'll be doing a teach for Mystery of the Temples, game designed by Wei Min Ling and art by Meshali Chan, game developed by Deepwater Games and published by Emperor S4. It's a light card-driven game that plays 2 to 4 players in about, as per the back of the box, about 20 to 40 minutes. You're really looking at 30 minutes or less once you have a group that's comfortable with the rules, and perhaps even less if you're playing with a two-player game. So it's fairly light and easy. Let's go to the table. Let's see how the setup works, what the rules look like, and hopefully this will give you a good sense on how to play the game if you want to have a game of it yourself at home. So let's go to the table and see how it works. All right, so welcome to the table. Here we have the game set up for a 3-player game, but for ease of presentation, we'll be using components for one of the players, which I will be using for demonstration purposes. But I will quickly go through the setup and talk a little bit about the differences based on player counts as well. So that will give you a sense on how things may be different if you're playing a 3-player game versus a 4-player game. And there are some specific variant rules for a 2-player game, which I'll come to at the very end of the teach. So to start off, at the center, you will lay out the temple cards. The game comes with 5 different temple cards, and all 5 will be used in each and every single game. They will be laid out in a circular fashion, as you can see here. So the one I'm holding out here, and then 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you'll keep them equidistant with a little bit of space because there's going to be more cards that go out in between. If you're playing a 4-player game, use the side that does not have any markers at the bottom. But if you are playing with 2 or 3 players, flip it over and you can identify the correct side because it will have 2 dots or 3 dots printed at the bottom. So because we're using a 3-player game as an example, we're using this side, but if you're playing with 4 players, feel free to switch over and use the correct side based on play count. Once you've set these out, the next thing we'll do is set out the wilderness cards. So these are the green cards that you can see laid out here. The game comes with 10 of these. It's not meant to be shuffled randomly. You will have a stack of these set out in sequence, so going from 1 to 10. And then place them, it doesn't matter which space you're starting off with, but they must go clockwise in sequential order, going from low cards to higher cards. So over here, we are starting off with 1, 2, and 3, and so on, and then it goes around the circle, ending up with 10 right beside, as the last wilderness card before we go back to 1 again. You will notice that 2 of these sections have lesser number of cards, and that is because of the player count in question. So if you are playing with lesser players, either a 2 or a 3-player game, you will take out specific cards based on the rule book. So over here, for a 3-player setup, we've taken out card number 4 and card number 7. All the other cards are still in play. The next thing you will do is you will set out these crystals at the center of the play area. These crystals, the colored ones, will correspond to the specific temples in question. So this will correspond to its own color. Yellow in front of me will correspond to its own temple. Red, green, and blue will all be laid out in that fashion in front of the temples. The colorless temples will form a common supply at the center of the play area. Next up, you will take the rune cards. The game comes with 20 of these. So this is what the front of a card could look like, and this is what the back of the cards will look like. Take them all, give them a shuffle, and lay out 4 cards to the back of each one of these different temples. Once you have laid out 4 cards face down, you will take the very top card, flip it up, and put it right there. So this way we have 4 cards laid out next to each of the different temples, and the very top card is face up. The remaining cards are face down. Next up, you will give each of the players their own player components. So you will get one of these sheets to keep track of the crystals that you have, as well as some added abilities at the bottom. These will be dished out in player order. So for example, in this example, if I were the second player in turn order, I would, for a basic game, pick up the card that has 2 printed at the very bottom. For a beginner game, it's recommended that you use side A, but in subsequent games, you can flip it over, use side B. There are also variants that you can use, which will determine how some of these cards are handed out. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But for a basic game, you will have 4 of these cards in the game, start with numbers ranging from 1 to 4. And for first game, use the sides that are labeled A. And then the first player will get 1A, second player gets 2A, and so on, depending on player count. So in this case, I'm the second player, I have 2A, and I've got this card laid out in front of me. You will also pick up your tokens, so the one meeple that you will get, as well as some of the cubes that you will have. The meeple will be in your hand at the start of the game, but you will take one of your cubes and put it on the score sheet, which is laid out to the side here, and it will start off at 0 for count. Lastly, you will put out these objective cards and the rune objective card to the side. So the rune objective card, there's only one of these in the game, and this will be used in each and every single game. You will take this and you will put it out as one of the objective cards for the game itself. Next up, there are 5 of these remaining objective cards, and these will correspond to the temples that are out here. You will randomly give it a shuffle, select 3 randomly, and put them out, which will sort of like go to the side of the table. So you have 4 objective cards, and they will all score at the end of the game itself. So with that done, once every player has their pieces and bits, the markers, you're ready to start your game. Now, what does a turn order look like? So the game continues until there is an end game trigger that is reached. And we'll talk about the end game trigger a little bit later on. But for a turn order, on your turn, you're basically doing 2 things. First, you will move your guy in a circle in a clockwise direction around the play area, landing on specific cards. And then for a second action, you will either be collecting these crystals, or you will be turning in the crystals in order to break curses on these temple cards. You will either be collecting crystals or breaking curses. You will not do both on the same turn. And the sequence of your action is always going to be the same. You will move first, and then you will do your action, which is collecting the crystal or breaking a curse. Let's have a look at how movement works. Now, at the start of the game, your meeple is not out in the player area yet. So on a first action, you can actually put him or put your meeple out on any one of these cards, which can either be on a wilderness card, or it can be on a temple card. And you will do the action of that corresponding one for your next step. But if you're obviously not in your first turn and the game is already started and you're doing your second or subsequent turns, you need to move this guy around. Now, the rule that you need to follow in order to do that is on your turn, this meeple can move between 1 and 3 spaces in a clockwise direction. And depending on whether you're landing on a wilderness card, which are these green cards, or the temple cards, which are these cards, you will only count the wilderness card or the temple card. What I mean by that is if I started here, for example, and I wanted to move to a wilderness card, my maximum of 3 steps will be counted as follows. 1, so I'm skipping over the temple card and I'm moving on to the next wilderness card. 2, 3. So I'm only counting the wilderness card in this example because my end destination is a wilderness card. If I were moving on to a temple card, I would ignore the wilderness card and then I count the temple cards only. So for example, if I again started from here and I wanted to move to a temple location, my movement of 1 to 3 spaces would be as follows. 1, so the temple card. 2, I'm going to the next temple card and I'm ignoring the wilderness cards. And then 3, which is the next temple card that's available. I will also note that any one of these cards can be occupied by any one player at any given point in time. So for example, if one of my opponents had their meeple placed right over here, and I wanted to move, let's say for example, 3 spaces or whatever number it is that I want to move, my count would ignore the temples as well as where the meeple is located. So this would look something like this. 1, 2, and then 3. Obviously, if your opponent is on a temple and you're moving to another temple, you would count it as 1. You would ignore this, skip, go to 2, and then go to 3. So you're always ignoring cards that are not the type you're looking to move into, and you're always skipping or ignoring wherever an opponent's meeple is. So that's what a movement looked like. Now there's a couple of different things to remember. You can always extend the number of spaces you can move by paying these colorless crystals as an extra resource. So you can move up to 3 maximum spaces. And I will quickly just refresh my memory on the crystal count that you need to pay to do that. Right, so you're paying between 1 to 6 crystals depending on how many extra spaces you wanted to move. So let's say, for example, I wanted to move from here and I need to get to this particular one, which would be a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For every 1 extra space you want to move, you're paying 1 colorless crystal. For every 2 extra spaces you want to move, you will pay 3 colorless crystals. And for every 3 spaces you want to move, you will pay 6 colorless crystals. So it ramps up a little bit exponentially depending on how many spaces you want to move. So in this case, if I wanted to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces, I would pay 3 crystals for the 2 extra spaces that I need to move. The next action that you will do is either collecting crystals or turning crystals in to break a curse. So when you're collecting crystals, whenever you land on, there are 2 different kind of wilderness cards out here. Whenever you land on a card that just gives you crystals straight up, you will effectively just collect whatever's printed out here. So for example, if I went from here and I decided to stop here, you will see that there are 2 crystals printed on this card. I will basically take a yellow and a colorless gem and then put it on my tracker sheet for the crystals right here. If I went to this, I'm obviously picking up a blue and a white. So it's easy to tell because it will just give you an image of the crystals you're meant to pick up. Next up, if you landed on one of the cards that have a conversion printed on it, so they do not just give you new crystals, but it allows you to convert your crystals into something else. So in this particular case, if I landed on this card, and you will see that this is also the same as, so this is card number 6. It is also the same as the card number 10. If you were to land here, you would turn in 3 white crystals, or rather colorless crystals, and you can pick up any 2 different colored crystals from the supply. So in this particular case, if I moved here and I'll turn in these 3 crystals, and let's say, for example, I wanted to pick up a red and blue, I will basically pick up 1 red from here and 1 blue from here. And it's as simple as that. When you are picking up crystals from the the supply from these cards or from conversions, and if you're out of crystals in the central play area, you can, for example, so if you're looking to pick up a colored crystal, and there, let's say for example, if I wanted to pick up, or if I had to pick up, as per this card, a yellow crystal, but there were no yellow crystals in the supply here, I will look at who has the most yellow crystal in their supply, and I can pick up 1 from them. So there's a slight bit of take that element with some of these actions. If you have multiple players tied for the most of the same colored crystals, you then choose who you want to take it from, and you will take it from them. When it's time for you to pick up colorless crystals, the same rule applies, but before you go to pick it up from one of the other players, there are certain actions that will put down these crystals on these cards as well. You will first need to pick it up from here before you go into somebody else's supply and pick it up from there. Which actually brings us to what some of these cards do. So for example, we had a look at cards that just give you crystals, cards that allow you to convert 3 white crystals into 2 different colored crystals, and then you have these 2 kind of crystals. Sorry, these 2 kind of cards. I'll quickly pick it up and show you what this basically does. So what this basically will do is, you will discard 2 colorless crystals from your hand. You will put it on these crystal markers that are printed out here, and you will pick up a corresponding crystal of that color. So for example, if I took my meeple and went over here, I will give up these 2. Now, I can only put it on a spot where space is available, so I can probably go here, pick up, this is not a blue one, this is a green one, and then I can perhaps go here as an example, and I can pick up a yellow one. What this basically means is the next time somebody goes there, that space for the yellow and the green crystals would not be available to them until these crystals come off. And the way that these crystals come off over the course of the game is whenever you have 2 or less empty spaces available, these will all move to the common supply, and then all of the spaces are available to everybody. So at the end of my action in this case, there's 5 spaces for crystals, 2 of them have been covered up, so this is still going to have 3 spaces left, so it's still going to continue. But then whenever somebody else comes in, they will place down a colorless crystal over here. Then if you have 2 or less spaces left, you will move these crystals to the supply, and then additional spaces now become available to everybody else. And the second way you can have crystals move out of here is, as I mentioned, if you need to pick up one of these colorless crystals and there is none left in the central supply, the first place you will look at are these cards out here. Pick up a colorless crystal from there, and only when these are empty and there is none available from there can you go to other players' cards where they're meant to store it and pick it up from there. And the same rule applies there as well. You will start with the player that has the most, and then if there's a tie, you get to choose who you're picking it up from. Right, so that's picking up crystals. The next action that you can do is you can go to a temple and you can break a curse. Now what does that mean? So when you're talking about breaking a curse, let's have a look at the anatomy of one of these cards. And I'll talk about some of these symbols which you will see in multiple cards near the end. This is where you can see a number of those crystals sort of like laid out in an arc fashion. And you will see that there are some boxes that have values printed on them. So you can turn in these crystals to pick up those points, and once you pick those up, you will put down these cubes on them, and that will block that spot for somebody else to go into. So how does that work? Let's have a look at this as an example. So over here, you can see you have yellow, yellow, blue, purple, 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 and then 2 blues, and then 1 red. Whenever you need to break a curse, you will look at the crystals that are on your card over here. You can either go from this end moving in that direction, or you can go from this end moving in this direction. And you can then see how far you can go based on the crystals that you have left in your supply. The other thing you need to also ensure you're doing is you can see that these spots where you're storing crystals have lines going through them. So you must have crystals in connected spots between 3 and 5 that can be used to be able to put down crystals in here. So let's have a look at a live example. So let's say I wanted to do the 2 yellows, a blue, and a purple. So if I can go and complete these 4 different spots, or provide these 4 crystals in this specific sequence, I can put down a cube here and get 5 points. How would that work? So I would need to have at least 2 crystals in my card over here. I would need to have perhaps 1 blue crystal over here, and then I would need to have a purple crystal on the card itself. I would also need to be able to go in sequence. So this is a good way of looking at how you would not be able to do this objective, because if you wanted to do this, you would need to go from a yellow to a yellow to a blue to a purple. So I could go from a yellow to a yellow, but I cannot go to a blue because blue's right here in the back. If it were here, I could go from a yellow to a blue. But then I would not be able to go to purple because purple is not right next to blue. But if this were something like this, I would be able to do that. So I would go from a yellow to a blue to a purple, which is the sequence that's needed to be followed here. And if I can do that successfully, I can take my cube, put it down in the 5 spot. I would move my cube here up to space 5 for the 5 points that I've collected. And what this also means is that everybody else is now blocked from completing that sequence and picking up those 5 points. You can complete these objectives between 3 and 5 crystals. So obviously you cannot go from here and then warp all the way to that side if these were completed, but you had the right sequences of crystals to do here. So keep that in mind. So with that, it's a little sort of like tricky to wrap your head around, but once you get a sense on the sequence of stones that you need to follow, it's pretty easy to get into. So to recap, you must have crystals laid out on a connecting path on your crystal map or card, so to speak, and they must follow the same sequence that you want to complete here. So in this particular case, my yellow goes to a yellow, goes to a blue, goes to a purple, which is the sequence that I need here to be able to do that. Now, if I wanted to go from the other side, we'll maybe just do another example to make sure that it is clear for everybody. I would need to go from a yellow to a blue, and then purple. So let's say I wanted to go the max 5 that's possible. It may look something like this. So here, all these 5 crystals are connected by a path. So starting with red, and I have the red here, you need to go to a blue. The very next one that I have available is a blue. This is a blue. I can go to a blue again, and then 2 purples, and there's a connecting path. And I can go in the right sequence that I need based on the card that I'm trying to fulfill. If I had my final crystal, let's say for example, here, this purple is not connected to this purple, so I would not be able to do that. The max I can do at that point is 4 crystals, either going in this direction or going in this direction. So hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer to understand how some of these objectives can be met. And that is one of the actions, obviously, that you can do on your turn if you're not collecting resources. So let's bring these back as we continue with the teach. So the game will continue in this fashion until somebody has laid out their 5th marker. So as you can see here, with 1 cube that's out in the score area, there are 5 cubes that you're playing with. As soon as somebody's placed their 5th cube on any one of these temple mats, that triggers the end of the game. Everybody gets an equal number of turns, so that player will finish their turn, and then everybody else left in turn order for that round will complete their actions, and then the game is over and we will go to end game scoring. I will point out a couple of housekeeping items or actions that you can do on your turn. If you ever want to get a crystal onto your mat and you do not, let's say for example, you don't have a right crystal in the right sequence or you don't have the right color, you can always pay 4 colorless crystals to be able to pick up any one crystal of your choice and put it on your mat. It's an expensive way to get crystals in order to be able to complete objectives, but if you're looking to break a curse or do a break a curse action, that could be one way that you can go about and do that. The other thing that I will quickly point out is any instance that requires you to use a colorless crystal, this can be substituted by a colored crystal over the course of the game, but the other way would not hold true. So if I had to spend this for any reason, I can always spend this instead, but if I had to spend this, I would obviously not be able to automatically spend this. So this is not exactly a wild, despite perhaps giving the sense that it might be in that sense. And I'll just make sure that I've not missed out on any other storage items. One other quick thing. Any given point in time, if you do have the right number of crystals you need to break a curse, but you do not have them in right sequence, you can spend one of these colorless gems and you can swap the space of any 2 gems on your card. So if I had something, it's just a very basic example. If I had something like this, I can spend a white crystal and switch these 2 over. You cannot send them to another empty spot, but they must basically swap the spaces with one another. So that's another thing you can do on your turn. The other thing you must keep in mind is it is a finite finite number of spaces on your crystal card itself, so you cannot have more than spaces that's sort of like laid out here. If you ever have, and I believe the number of spaces is 12, if you ever have more than 12 crystals in your supply, you must discard down to 12 at the end of your turn. Next up, we have put out these rune cards, but we haven't talked about them yet, so let's have a quick look at those. Rune cards are what you will collect whenever you complete whenever you break a curse on one of the temples. So let's say, for example, if I went here and I broke one of the curses, and it doesn't matter if it's a 3 crystal curse or a 4 or 5 crystal curse, you will pick up the very top card and you will put it in your play area as part of your tableau. And that now gives you an added ability on your turn that will trigger whenever you go to any one of these spots. So if we go back to the wilderness cards and the temple cards, you will see that at the bottom right, these have a symbol, a rune symbol that's printed on them. And these are obviously rune cards, and you will see this symbol repeating on some of these. So for example, this wilderness card corresponds with this particular symbol right here. And then I'm looking for the right temple. And I actually cannot see a temple with this corresponding one, but there are others there as well that do that. So this, for example, rune card corresponds with this symbol on this temple card. Now the reason why this is important is because of two things. So first of all, you're getting the card when you break a curse on a corresponding temple that it's laid out next to. Once you've picked it up, you will flip over the next card and then it becomes available. So you always see the next rune card that's available for each individual temple. Once you have it, it gives you an ongoing ability. Now, what that means is, so let's say for example, on my action, on a later turn, I were to go to a card that has a corresponding rune symbol. Whenever I take an action on a card, and that can be a wilderness card or a temple card, that corresponds to a rune card that I already have, it will trigger its special ability, and I will get that specific benefit. Some rune cards will basically give you extra gems. So for example, something like this basically means whenever you do an action on a card that has this symbol on it, you will gain 2 colorless crystals. So you basically take this and put this on your mat itself. Something like this basically tells you that whenever you're supposed to turn in sort of like gems to be able to get an extra one, you can turn it in with a different number or get a different number of them. So the end of the rule book actually lays out all the different description of the rune card itself. So I'll leave it for you to discover that, but just keep in mind that these give you extra benefits that can combo up over the course of the game as well. If you have multiple cards with the same rune symbol, they will all trigger when you go to one of those cards. So for example, if I had these two, which have the same rune symbol, and I went to this location to do this action, both of these will trigger and I will get the benefit of both of these. There is no limit to how many rune cards you can have with yourself over the course of the game itself. Right, so with that, I think we've pretty much covered the rules around the actions themselves. Let's have a quick look at end game scoring. So this is where you would have collected points over the course of the game, moving your marker along as appropriate. At the end of the game, you will now score for the 4 different cards laid out here. The way that this will work is, you will pick, this card, as I said, was for the rune objective, and you will score this for every game, regardless of the other ones that are chosen. What this basically says is, for each unique rune card that you've collected, and by unique I mean unique rune symbol that you have, you will score points accordingly. So if you have only one unique rune card, rune symbol on the rune cards, you will get 1 point, and then 2 for 2, but then it starts ramping up, 4 for 3, leading up to 11 points for if you have successfully managed to collect all the 5 different unique rune symbols on there. Next up, you will look at each of the different corresponding temples for the different objective cards that are laid out here. So this, for example, corresponds to this particular temple. Whoever has most cubes laid out on this temple will get 4 points, and whoever's second will get 2. For this, you're basically just counting the cubes that are out on the card, not the points that have been collected. So keep that in mind. And if there is a tie, then ties will basically split the total points. So for example, if there's a tie for first place, instead of somebody getting 4 points and another player getting 2 points, 4 and 2 for a combined value of 6 will be split equally. So each player will get 3 points, and there will be no points awarded for second place. If there's a tie for second place, then the first player is obviously getting 4 points, but whoever's tied for second will split at the 2 points for 1 point each from that point of view. And you will do this for all of the 3 cards, which will correspond to different temple cards laid out here. And once you're done with that, add up the total values, and whoever has the most points wins. There's a couple of additional rules around 2-player game and what's called an advanced game that I will leave for you to discover for yourself once you've done a few playthroughs of this. The 2-player game basically adjusts some of the cards and initial setup that you would have to do. Additionally, one of the variants, which maybe I'll just quickly call out because it's interesting and you can do that fairly early on, is once you're comfortable with some of the cards, these cards that are laid out here, you will see that there's actions that you can do at the bottom for some of these. And if you use the B side, there's a little bit more advanced variant going on here. You can use these as a draft instead of just randomly handing them out based on sequence. So in this particular case, you would lay out the number of cards based on player count, and then starting in reverse turn order. So the player that's going at the very last will pick one of these, and then going from, so let's say for example, if it's a 4-player game, the 4th player picks up the first one, then the third, then the second, ending with the first will pick up one, and then obviously they're the start player for the rest of the game. So with that, that covers the rules as well as some specific items around variants. I will leave the other specific card descriptions for all of these, as well as some additional rules around the variants specifically related to this for you to discover on your own once you've done a few games over this. So with that, let's go back to the table for some closing comments. All right, folks, so that includes the rules of the game. Hopefully this gives you a sense on what the rules are like, as well as what a turn order could look like. So if you have a game and you've been holding off on playing it, this hopefully helps you get it to the table a little bit faster. Also gives you a sense on whether the game is up your alley, in case you're looking to pick it up as well. The game, a first playthrough can sort of like take a few turns to get used to in terms of what the actions are, what the mechanics are, because there's some minor details you want to keep track of. It's not, I mean, it is a light game, but it's not super light from that point of view. It's not, a Splendor where there's a few very specific rules you want to keep track of, but then it just moves along quite fast. But once you get the hang of it, it is not a heavy game at all. It is a relatively light game to get into, something that you can learn quickly. Setup is easy as well, as you can see. Aesthetically, I really like the look of the crystals. They're nice. They add a little bit of flair. The game also, or at least the version that I have, also came with cardboard markers that you can use instead of the crystals as well. But I find that this is a nicer touch, although that may be a little bit more practical if you want to use it, so keep that in mind. But yeah, other than that, nifty little game that can be played between 2 to 4 players, so hopefully you'll give it a go, and I'll see you at the next one. Take care, guys.